All right. I do think there are some things. We talked about some school-specific situations, which is maybe the more general way to do things with the student information system sync and those kinds of things. But there are some ESU-specific issues, I think, that come up as well. I mentioned already that the ESU doesn't need to do the data synchronization, so our setup should be less complex, at least in that particular part of the setup. We're also providing a lot of just-in-time learning. And the costs for us, for users, are really going to be based on how many trainees we're going to have, right? It's not based on how many students are enrolled in the school or any of those kinds of things. But we also maintain active relationships with other organizations. And so we go from the less complex setup on the data synchronization side to the more complex setup in that we have relationships that we have to establish, not just maintaining them personally, but they actually have to build connectors on the back end at the Canvas, headquarters for those kinds of things. And so it creates a relatively complex relational network. And so we're going to talk about that. The more I've studied this, the more I'm amazed that Instructure, the Canvas parent company, do this. But they can, and I think that makes it exciting. So
they just need a lot of terms to do it.
Yeah, exactly. I mentioned the commons before, so just putting NDE, ESU CC at the top, schools off to the side, and a couple of ESUs at the bottom, just so that we have a representative illustration here. We could all belong to the same Canvas Commons Consortium, and that would allow us to have master classes that we can all share, or if somebody makes a really good training and other schools want to offer it, again, these are things that we can share among the entire state.
So when you say can, is that in place now, or is that something we're in talks about trying to do?
At this point, because so many schools are just coming on board, we have to kind of get through that setup process first, and then establish that Commons Consortium as well, and make sure that all those schools get connected into that. So it's not in place at this time, but I think by this time next year, we could certainly be talking about that it's there and ready.
That's terrific too. You have the ability to share.
So, I mentioned ESUs offering training to their schools as well, but NDE also might want to do that. ESU CC might have some state level things that they want to offer. And there's this thing that Canvas calls a trust relationship that is required for that. And it's actually a legal piece. There's some paperwork involved and some things like that. So NDE and a small group of us are kind of trying to talk through right now how to make sure that paperwork happens in the simplest way possible. We don't want to bombard you with ESU paperwork and then follow it up with NDE and then follow that up with ESU CC. And we also want it to be relatively not only a simple process, but as simple a paperwork as legal paperwork can be. So this is, again, something that's not in place right now, but something that we know we need to work on and hopefully can have in place for next year. It's complicated enough that there'll be some time on the back end for this to be built, even after the paperwork is done. So I can't tell you a time frame on this, but again, this is that opportunity for us to have those relationships, the connectors built on the back end, that allow us to not have to pay, ESU 9 that way won't have to pay for user licenses. If one of our schools already has Canvas, they can just take trainings with the same user licenses. And then the other thing that we've talked about a little bit at the ESU level is this idea of shared ESU training materials. I can see ESUs wanting to do that back and forth with each other. We already do that in a lot of other ways. So why not also in Canvas, right? There are a couple different ways that I can see that happening. And it might depend on what we want to accomplish with them. If ESU 9's developed a training and we're just saying, hey, you guys offer this too, then that might be an opportunity to share it kind of through the Commons. Or we might have to create our own Commons Consortium. I don't know all of the logistics behind how that works, whether we need our own smaller one or whether the big one is the right place. But that's certainly a possibility. Another possibility is that maybe ESU 9 and another ESU want to go together and develop a training and even offer it together. If we want to do that, this model won't work because we don't have the right trust relationships built from this other slide.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say.
My ESU doesn't have trust relationships with some other ESU schools. And so at that point, we may have to push it up to ESUCC, or possibly even establish ESU individual sub-accounts with ESUCC, so that we can have some individual pieces that are in there, like that may be where I put this training that I'm developing, but it can still be offered to other ESUs as well. And ESUCC might already have those relationships with all those schools, so that it would be easy for that to happen. And so there are some places where I think we're going to want to put our resources at ESUCC's instance instead. So again, we've got some trust relationships that need to be built there, but we might also need some sub-accounts built there as well. And again, don't know all the details. There's a lot of implementation conversations that are going to happen over the next couple of years, probably, in order for any of this to really move forward well. But I like to do that homework on the back end and make sure that we're asking the right questions and getting the paperwork and fees all organized ahead of time, so that we can do what we want to do and it isn't as hard later. So that's kind of what this conversation's about. But I do see there being some advantages to this model. It's a little bit weird because then I have to think about which place I'm putting ESU 9's training, right? I have to think about, is that in the ESUCC area or is it in ESU 9's area? I'd really rather avoid that confusion, but at the same time, if we need to cross ESU boundaries at all, I think this is going to be something that's a distinct possibility. The other thing that's nice about it is if I've got a master course of some kind and I make changes to it, and somebody else is also using it, they don't have to go get the latest copy out of the commons and make sure that their changes get re-added in and those kinds of things if it's here. They can just start using that same course if it's part of that ESUCC shared area. So I think there's some advantages that way. And then we mentioned catalog earlier. Catalog is an add-on with an extra fee. If we want to use catalog as an ESU, it might be better to use it at a parent level with ESUCC, for instance, instead of trying to license it separately for any ESU that wants to use it. I talked about the support master account before. It's its own kind of separate instance. I made it its own color here. Notice that it has connections to the individual ESU and then to all of that ESU schools. So I guess, that's a lot of stuff that I just covered pretty fast. It's probably deeper than a lot of people really cared to think about. But at the same time, because of all the terminology that's being thrown around, because of some of the other things that are there, I just felt it was really important to get as much of that information out there in as easy a picture as I could think of in my head, so that other people at least have a chance of understanding it, because it took me a while to get here myself, and I was doing the homework. So, I guess with all of that in mind, now that you've listened to this far through the presentation, what is it that you're going to do about it? Well, if your ESU doesn't have Canvas, at least consider signing up for an instance. And I know that every ESU has heard about that already. I know that every ESU is probably already in that consideration phase if they haven't done so. But certainly think about that. I do think at least PDO members are probably going to need to have Canvas accounts in the future. And then in addition to that, your ESU might have a support relationship with your schools that you want to maintain related to Canvas implementation as well, just to help them through the process. Along those lines, NDE is asking that each ESU designate a primary Canvas contact. And that would be the person that will manage Canvas communications between your ESU and both NDE and ESU2. ESU2 has some employees that are helping with that communication, helping with the contract management, those kinds of things. And so they want to make sure that ESUs are in the loop when the schools get signed up for Canvas. And that's what this primary Canvas contact is going to do, is make sure that person will have the information or will receive the information related to schools in their area that are signed up and working through the setup process and those kinds of things.
So
and also
am I wrong in thinking that might be someone who ends up with one of those master accounts in trying to sort of be the middle person between, I know it says here ESU and NDE, but that would maybe be the same person that would be communicating with those individual districts, right?
Right, that would have that support master and be able to reach out and log in directly and help that school set up, certainly. And that support master isn't going to be set up right away that I know of. but maybe it will. Maybe we're going to work that direction as well. But yeah, certainly I think that would be the same person. And it could look different at every ESU. In ESU 9, it might be me as a member of the tech department, but it could also be, you know, a TLT person, or if you've got an SDA member that really loves, you know, the whole online learning piece and just really wants to go after that with the schools, then maybe it's an SDA person instead too.
Mm-hmm.
I think that looks different in every ESU, or at least it has the chance to. And, you know, I say a primary Canvas contact. NDE will allow for there to be more than one at the ESU level if you want to have 2 people on that list instead. But you should at least have one on that list, because that way you'll get notified when a new school is coming on in your area. And then finally, you know, I think you should consider talk in your local ESU about how much your ESU will participate in supporting schools and how much your ESU might participate in using Canvas on your own, because that will determine how many of these relational bridges that I just worked through, the Commons Consortium, the trusts, the support master instance, all of those kinds of things are needed. And at some point you'll have to coordinate that with NDE and ESU2 and Instructure in order to get everything set up properly. And then finally, I've got a little more information slide. NDE is maintaining a Canvas statewide consortium page that has the current sign-up link that's active through September 25th, as well as a frequently asked questions document linked to that. And then just a couple of contacts. You notice I'm not on that list. That's, you know, my primary role is not in Canvas at all. And I am just trying to get some of this back-end homework done and then communicate about it as effectively as I know how.
Well, and you've done a great job with that here in sharing this out. I know this is really pertinent information for the moment, because as you pointed out, it's probably harder to untangle if we get too tangled with all those different connections, or fail to sort of recognize where the opportunity lies to maybe increase our own productivity and our ability to collaborate and share effectively if we don't think about how to leverage this to its full potential. And I think moral of the story too, get with Canvas so that we can start to tap into those different avenues for that collaboration. So thanks so much for your leadership with everything, and hopefully this video is really helpful to others in trying to sort out how best to use this LMS.
All right. I hope the same, Andrew. I really hope that this is at least effective in everybody understanding what their own role might need to be.
Yeah. Well, thank you.